If you plant the right perennials in May, you can have a full, colorful garden by midsummer. And in many cases, you won't have to start over again next year. That's the part most people miss. They keep replanting every season, adding more work, but not really building anything that lasts. But some gardeners do something different. They choose plants that settle in once and quietly improve year after year. In this video, I'll show you 13 perennials you can plant right now. Plants that don't need much attention, but give you a garden that feels fuller each season. And if you enjoy this kind of simple, practical approach, we share new videos every week to help you grow a garden that gets easier over time. Black-eyed Susan, or Rudbeckia, is native to North America. You'll often see it growing naturally in prairies, open fields, and even along roadsides. That alone tells you something important. This is a plant adapted to tough, real conditions, not carefully managed gardens. Today, it's widely used across the United States in home gardens, public landscapes, and pollinator plantings, mainly because it's reliable and low maintenance. If you plant it in May, most varieties will start blooming by mid to late summer and continue until the first frost. So from one planting, you can get around 2 to 3 months of continuous color in the first year. In terms of difficulty, this is one of the easiest perennials to grow. It prefers full sun and soil that drains reasonably well. But beyond that, it tolerates drought, poor soil, heat, and humidity. One thing that often surprises people: too much fertilizer or overly rich soil can actually make it weaker, causing tall stems to flop over. This is a plant that performs better when conditions are simple rather than perfect. From a garden design perspective, Black-eyed Susan works well as a foundation plant. It fills space, holds color through the season, and makes it easier for more demanding plants around it to stand out. Coneflower, or Echinacea, is also native to North America, especially the central and eastern prairie regions. It evolved in open, sunny environments with dry soil, strong sun, and seasonal drought. Today, it's one of the most widely planted perennials in the U.S., not just in home gardens, but in pollinator gardens and restoration projects, mainly because it supports a wide range of wildlife. If you plant coneflower in May, you can expect blooms starting in mid to late summer, and in many cases, it will continue flowering for 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes longer depending on the variety. In terms of difficulty, this is still considered an easy plant, but slightly more sensitive than Black-eyed Susan. It prefers full sun, well-drained soil, and once established, it becomes quite drought-tolerant. One important detail that many people overlook: don't cut the flower heads too early at the end of the season. Those seed heads are a major food source for birds, especially finches during fall and winter. Over time, coneflowers can also spread, either by self-seeding or by slowly expanding clumps. So if you plant a few now, you'll likely have more in the same area after a few seasons, without doing anything extra. Shasta daisy is not a wild native in the same way as the previous plants. It was actually developed through breeding in Europe. It's a hybrid species, created to combine strong stems, clean white flowers, and reliable garden performance. Today, it's one of the most recognizable perennials in the U.S., especially in cottage gardens, borders, and cut flower gardens, mainly because it's simple and very consistent. If you plant Shasta daisy in May, you can expect blooms starting in early to mid-summer, and with regular deadheading, it can continue blooming for several weeks, sometimes longer. In terms of difficulty, this is an easy, beginner-friendly plant. It prefers full sun, moderately fertile soil, and good drainage. It doesn't need perfect conditions, but it does perform better than most in average garden soil. One useful habit with this plant, cutting off spent flowers, also called deadheading, helps the plant produce more blooms instead of going to seed early. Over time, Shasta daisy forms larger clumps, and every 2 to 3 years, you can divide those clumps in spring to create new plants for free and keep the original plant healthy and vigorous. In garden design, this is often used as a balance plant. The white flowers help soften stronger colors and give the eye a place to rest, which makes the whole garden feel more organized, even when it's quite full. Lavender is native to the Mediterranean region, where the climate is dry, sunny, and the soil is often rocky and low in nutrients. That origin explains almost everything about how it grows. Today, lavender is widely grown across the U.S., especially in warmer, drier regions like California, but also in home gardens across many climates with the right setup. If you plant lavender in May, you can usually expect flowers by mid to late summer, and once established, it will continue blooming each year, often with stronger growth over time. In terms of difficulty, lavender is often considered easy, but many gardeners struggle with it for one reason. They treat it like a plant that needs rich soil and regular watering. In reality, lavender prefers the opposite. It needs full sun, very well-drained soil, low to moderate watering. If the soil stays too wet, especially around the roots, the plant can decline quickly. One practical tip: plant lavender in raised beds, slopes, or areas where water drains away easily. And avoid heavy mulch or overwatering, especially in humid climates. Once you get the conditions right, lavender becomes a long-lasting, low-maintenance plant with the added benefit of fragrance, pollinators, and even usable flowers for drying. Salvia, especially Salvia nemorosa, is native to Europe and parts of Western Asia, where it grows in open, sunny areas with well-drained soil. Over time, it has become one of the most widely used perennials in U.S. gardens, especially in borders, pollinator gardens, and low-maintenance landscapes. If you plant salvia in May, it typically begins blooming in late spring to early summer. And unlike many perennials, it doesn't stop after one bloom cycle. With a simple cutback after the first flush, it will produce a second round of flowers, and sometimes even a third later in the season. In terms of difficulty, this is a very reliable and beginner-friendly plant. It prefers full sun, well-drained soil, and once established, it handles heat and short dry periods quite well. One key practice that makes a big difference: after the first bloom fades, cut the flower spikes back by about 1/3 to 1/2. This signals the plant to produce new growth instead of putting energy into seeds. Another advantage: salvia is highly attractive to pollinators, especially bees and hummingbirds. And at the same time, it's relatively resistant to deer because of its aromatic leaves. In garden design, salvia is often used to create repetition and rhythm. Those vertical purple or blue spikes help connect different parts of the garden visually and keep color moving through the season. Catmint, or Nepeta, is native to Europe, Asia, and parts of the Middle East, where it grows in dry, sunny, and often rocky environments. That background makes it very well adapted to typical garden conditions, especially areas with heat, sun, and less than perfect soil. Today, catmint is widely used in U.S. gardens, particularly along borders, pathways, and around roses, because it's both decorative and very consistent. If you plant catmint in May, it will usually begin blooming by late spring to early summer, and one of its biggest advantages is that it doesn't stop there. After the first wave of flowers fades, if you cut the plant back, it will regrow quickly and produce a second flush of blooms, sometimes even a third later in the season. In terms of difficulty, this is a very easy and forgiving plant. It prefers full sun to light shade, well-drained soil, and once established, it tolerates drought, heat, and poor soil very well. One common mistake: letting the plant grow without trimming at all. Over time, it can become loose and floppy, and the flowering slows down. A simple cutback after the first bloom keeps it compact and much more productive. In garden design, catmint is often used as a softening plant. Its loose, flowing shape and cool blue-purple color help connect different plants together and make the whole garden feel more natural instead of rigid or overly structured. Yarrow, or Achillea, is native to Europe and Asia, but it has naturalized across North America and is now very common in the U.S. You'll often see it growing in dry fields, roadsides, and open landscapes, which tells you it's highly adaptable. Today, yarrow is widely used in low-maintenance gardens, especially in hot, dry areas where many other plants struggle. If you plant yarrow in May, it usually begins blooming in early to mid-summer and can continue flowering for several weeks, sometimes repeating if lightly trimmed. In terms of difficulty, this is one of the most resilient perennials you can grow. It prefers full sun, well-drained soil, but it can tolerate very poor soil, drought, heat. One important thing to know: if the soil is too rich or too moist, yarrow can become weak and spread too aggressively. In the right conditions, it stays compact and balanced. Another practical benefit: yarrow attracts beneficial insects like hoverflies and predatory wasps, which help control pests naturally in your garden. In garden design, yarrow works well in difficult areas, slopes, dry patches, or places where other plants don't establish easily. It fills space, stabilizes soil, and adds consistent color without needing much care. Blanket flower, or Gaillardia, is native to North and South America, especially in dry, open regions with strong sun and sandy soil. This background makes it naturally suited to heat and drought, conditions where many other plants struggle. Today, it's commonly used in U.S. gardens, particularly in low-maintenance landscapes and hot, sunny borders, because of one main reason: it blooms for a very long time. If you plant blanket flower in May, it can begin blooming by early summer and often continues all the way until fall with very little interruption. In terms of difficulty, this is a very easy plant to grow. It prefers full sun, well-drained, even sandy soil, and it performs best when conditions are not too rich. One common mistake: trying to improve the soil too much. Too much fertilizer or overly rich soil can actually reduce flowering and make the plant weaker. A simple habit that helps: removing spent flowers during peak season can encourage even more continuous blooming. But even without that, it still performs reliably. In garden design, blanket flower works as a color bridge. Its warm tones, red, orange, yellow, help connect different flowering periods and keep the garden looking active, especially in mid to late summer when some plants start to fade. Hosta is native to East Asia, mainly Japan, Korea, and parts of China, where it grows naturally in woodland areas with filtered light and consistent moisture. That origin explains why it performs best in shade. Today, Hosta is one of the most widely used shade perennials in the U.S., especially in residential gardens, under trees, and along shaded borders, mainly because it's reliable over many years. If you plant Hosta in May, you won't see dramatic flowers right away, but the foliage will establish quickly, and by mid to late summer, the plant will already look full and structured. Over time, each year it comes back larger than before. In terms of difficulty, this is a very easy plant to grow. It prefers partial shade to full shade, consistently moist, well-drained soil. It does not tolerate prolonged dryness as well as sun perennials, so watering during dry periods is important. One common issue, damage from slugs and snails, especially in humid environments. If you notice holes in the leaves, that's usually the cause. Simple controls like barriers or regular checking can help manage this early. Another key point, hostas are long-lived. A single plant can stay in the same spot for decades, and every few years you can divide it to create multiple new plants. In garden design, hosta works as a structure plant for shade. It fills space with large, consistent foliage and creates a stable background, so other seasonal plants can come and go without leaving the area looking empty. Bleeding heart is native to East Asia, particularly China, Korea, and Japan, where it grows in cool, shaded woodland environments. This tells you right away it prefers shade and consistent moisture. Today, it's commonly grown in U.S. gardens, especially in shaded areas where early season interest is needed. Because unlike many perennials, it blooms quite early in the season. If you plant bleeding heart in May, you may already catch part of its bloom period. But in most cases, you'll see its full display the following spring. It typically flowers in late spring, around the same time as tulips and early perennials. In terms of difficulty, this is a moderate but still manageable plant. It prefers partial to full shade, cool conditions, moist, well-drained soil. It does not perform well in hot, dry locations. One important behavior to understand, after it finishes blooming, the plant will naturally die back in early to mid-summer. This is not a problem. It's part of its normal life cycle. A common mistake, thinking the plant is failing and removing it too early. Instead, it's better to plan around this behavior. Plant later season perennials nearby so they can fill the space as bleeding heart fades. In garden design, this is a seasonal highlight plant. It brings strong visual interest early in the year, then steps back, allowing other plants to take over, which keeps the garden changing naturally over time. Astilbe is native to East Asia and North America, where it grows naturally in woodland edges and along streams, in areas with consistent moisture and filtered light. That origin explains why it performs best in damp, shaded conditions. Today, Astilbe is widely used in U.S. gardens, especially in spots where many other plants struggle, like low areas, near downspouts, or shaded beds that stay moist. If you plant Astilbe in May, it will usually establish through early summer and begin blooming from mid to late summer, depending on the variety. The flowers can last several weeks, and even after fading, the dried plumes often remain visually interesting. In terms of difficulty, this is a moderate plant, but very predictable if conditions are right. It prefers partial shade, consistently moist soil, good organic matter in the soil. Unlike many perennials, it does not tolerate dry soil well. One common mistake, letting the soil dry out too often. If that happens, you'll notice browning leaf edges and reduced flowering. A simple solution, plant it in naturally moist areas or group it with other shade plants that receive regular watering. Mulching lightly can also help retain moisture without making the soil waterlogged. In garden design, Astilbe adds vertical texture to shaded spaces. Its soft, feathery plumes contrast with broad leaves like Hosta and help prevent shade gardens from looking flat or heavy. Peony, or Peonia, is native to Asia, Europe, and parts of North America, with a long history of cultivation, especially in China where it has been grown for over 1,000 years. That long history reflects one thing: this is a plant built for longevity. Today, peonies are widely grown across the U.S., especially in cooler regions, and are often considered one of the most reliable long-term perennials in home gardens. If you plant peony in May, you may not see flowers right away. In most cases, the first year is focused on root establishment. By the second year, growth improves, and by the third year, you typically start to see consistent blooms. Once established, peonies bloom in late spring, with a flowering period of about 2 to 3 weeks, but the flowers are large, dense, and highly noticeable. In terms of difficulty, this is a moderate plant, mainly because of one critical detail: planting depth. Peonies prefer full sun, well-drained, fertile soil. But the eyes, the buds at the crown, should only be about 1 to 2 inches below the soil surface. If planted too deep, the plant will grow leaves but may not flower at all. This is one of the most common issues gardeners face. Once planted correctly, peonies require very little ongoing care. They can remain in the same location for decades, often improving in size and flowering each year. In some cases, they can last for generations. In garden design, peony works as a seasonal focal point. It provides a strong visual moment in late spring, then transitions into a structural green plant for the rest of the season. Heuchera, also called coral bells, is native to North America. In the wild, it often grows in rocky woodlands, shaded slopes, and areas with filtered light. Today, it's very popular in U.S. gardens, especially in shade gardens, borders, and containers. Unlike many perennials, Heuchera is grown mostly for its leaves, not its flowers. The foliage can be deep burgundy, silver, lime green, caramel, purple, or almost black, depending on the variety. If you plant it in May, it will settle in through summer and give you color almost immediately through the leaves. In terms of difficulty, Heuchera is fairly easy. It prefers partial shade, well-drained soil, steady moisture but not soggy soil. One common mistake is planting it in too much hot afternoon sun. That can scorch the leaves, especially in warmer climates. In garden design, Heuchera is very useful because it gives color even when nothing is blooming. It works well near Hosta, Astilbe, and other shade plants, and helps the garden look finished throughout the season. If you choose the right perennials, you don't have to rebuild your garden every year. You plant once, and over time it starts to take care of itself. If this way of gardening feels right to you, we share new videos here every week. Simple ideas that make your garden easier to grow over time.